Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Interesting and Sexy, a podcast dedicated to spreading the awareness and visibility of intersex people, as well as discussing issues/experiences about queer life, being different, and all other things interesting and sexy. Thank you very much for tuning in again. Obviously, as always, it means the world. Today's guest is Cody Smith, who is a retired intersex activist from Canberra in the ACT here in Australia. This is a really great episode. We just get straight into it. It's just deep, straight away. And then we're touching on some taboo topics, and it was really fun and joyful and deep. And I hope you all enjoy it. And like I always say, the best way to support this show, if you were enjoying it, is to leave a comment, to like, to share, subscribe if this is your first time coming across this. And yeah. And also, if you would like to donate to this show, there is a donation link in the description below. But without further ado, obviously, this show is not about me, it's about our guests. So I'm going to introduce you to Cody and let Cody do all the talking. Hey, Codes. Nice to see you
Mm.
again.
You're one of about three people on this planet who get away with calling me a nickname.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry.
No, like I say, you get away with it. I don't often let people get away with it.
Oh, well, that makes me feel nice.
Uh,
What don't you like
uh,
about nicknames?
it's not that I don't like nicknames. It's just Cody is kind of my perfect name. I remember when I first started using the name Cody, I had a friend who told me that I wear it like a well-fitted jacket, and
Mm.
so I've never seen the need to shorten or bastardize or change it. But
Oh, okay. All
yeah,
right, fair enough. All right, okay. I will nix the nickname then because
no,
I
like,
understand the feeling of like having a sacred name to you.
well, it's actually fine because like I have a bestie over in West Australia who calls me Cody Smith. So like,
Um,
like I said, there's a precious few who get away with it.
yeah. Wait one second. I just have to make sure. Oh my God. Okay, I knew I hadn't pressed record on my actual camera. Ah! Damn it, we've got that. That was a nice little thing, but maybe I can just include it with my bad video camera. I'm really excited to have you on today. Yeah,
Hmm.
we've already met before for anybody listening to this. We met at the Intersex retreat and it was awesome. And you did something there that I still take to this day, your stand-up comedy piece. I still read that to people because it was so awesome and just yeah, so hilarious. And then you
Hmm.
also had your piece about your jacket, which was so emotional. I was bawling my eyes out.
Oh yeah, it's obviously a lot of my work has been about finding the right words and putting them in the right order. And so, whereas usually that's for like resource development or a press release or like trying to find the right way to connect an audience to a concept. It's a lot more fun when I get to use my powers for evil. So I love doing a bit of the spoken word.
Yeah, nice. And how long have you been doing that?
Um, I mean, variously, I feel like I've been doing it my whole life, to be honest. Like one of the things that I talk about in terms of like my experiences as an intersex person is having exercise books from when I was in primary school, where I wrote stories about being a space alien hiding among the human population. And to
Mhm.
me, that was just me talking about my intersex experience when I didn't have the language to
Mhm.
because I knew I was different. I knew I had to go see the doctor more often than my friends, even though I wasn't sick, and I knew that my connection to gender identity was different to how other people connected to their gender identities, and all this kind of stuff that didn't make sense to me as a child until like my parents basically disclosed to me that I was intersex at the age of 17. So that's sort of like where my journey is. But I think I've always had an interest in language, and especially when I got into sort of the space of queer politics, seeing how language evolves very rapidly and
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the emergence of micro labels and sort of like changes of etiquette around pronouns and names and sort of like, and even just how we talk about intersex has changed over the last. So I've been an activist for almost a decade, close enough to a decade. We'll call it a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And even the way like we talked about intersex then is different from the way we talk about intersex now. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah. And why do you think the language changes so much?
I mean, language adapts to need. At the end of the day, is when you have a common experience and you find other people who share that experience with you, you want to be able to describe that experience so you can invite other people in. Or I think even like if we look at youth slang, it's sort of like kids need language to sort of rebel against convention and stake independence, like an independent identity from what's come before. So it's to me like I guess a lot of people at my age get very very frustrated at what is a gat, what is skibbity riz and all that kind of stuff, and it's just you know we had our own sort of nonsense terminology when we were growing up, and it's just about creating a space for expression that hasn't come before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like I find it hard to keep up with the language that was being used by like my sister is like Gen Z to the max. And when
Mm.
I'm around her, it's like being on TikTok all the time. But then I remember the words that I probably used when I was younger, and I'm like, yeah, that was my own nonsense that also has like left
Mm.
my brain now. But
Also random. If
yeah.
you were in the room, I'd glomp you, all that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
lol, so random XD.
XD. I still XD, much
Me
to the shame of my
too.
peers. But why did XD have to go out of fashion?
Yeah, I know. So, do you want to, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but do you just want to give a little introduction to who you are and what you do and what you're about?
Yeah, boy, we kind of put the horse before the cart, didn't we? So I'm Cody Smith. I am an intersex activist based in Canberra with lived experience of medical intervention. So my story is that I was born with an intersex variation. I don't disclose it because I don't feel like people should have to disclose to have legitimacy in our space.
Absolutely.
But I had, I think it was 4 surgeries before the age of 2. I was put on hormone replacement therapy as a teenager. And then when I turned 17, like I said, my parents basically disclosed to me that I was intersex. I went through a whole sort of crisis of identity, crisis of confidence at that time in my life, and came out the other end of it sort of angry at the world. Um, and then really I spent, like I said, the last decade just trying to change the circumstances so that no one has to have the experiences that I did. So the upshot of that is I worked with a local charity. Actually, I got started off in grassroots education with a transgender organization called Trans Australia.
Hmm.
I then became Canberra's first paid intersex worker with a gender agenda. I was the intersex project officer with a gender agenda.
Amazing.
So I built up a lot of sort of peer support and resources here in Canberra, and did a lot of work towards legislation and the Australian Human Rights Commission report. Um, and then somehow I found an opportunity to work with Morgan Carpenter at ERA. And that was sort of the last couple of years. We got that intersex legislation across the line in the ACT, which, it's the first legislation in Australia and it's the best of its kind in the world, I humbly think.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not so humble about it. It was a profound achievement. Certainly a highlight of my life so far.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now I deliver food. And that's sort of where I'm at the moment. It's sort of like I'm walking away from activism largely because it has a lot of unique stresses and pressures, and it, damn me, like the damn job broke me several times over. So it's nice just trying to reconnect to who I was as a person before that, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
find that curiosity, that joy, that creativity, all that sort of like stuff that sort of got pushed aside so that I could do the work. Um, yeah.
So do you feel like the role that you took on as an activist was kind of consuming your whole life?
Oh, it was destructive, but the thing is that I didn't feel like if at any point in time, if I walked away from it, I would have regretted it. And it's sort of like for me, having gone through this process that harmed me, sort of like this going through this medical violence, the idea that this was something that could just happen to me and nothing should come of it was not something I could ever sort of reconcile with. It's sort of like it felt like I'd never be able to feel peace until the world had changed. Like I couldn't make sense of why this happened to me until I used it to change the world for better.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I got goosebumps when you when you said that. And do you think the achievement with the legislation was kind of like a step for you to be like, oh, okay, now I can take a step back?
It's really let me bury my demons. So,
Yeah.
like in a really profound way, like I would say that I would wake up angry at the world. I would beat myself up, feeling like I was just tired and sad and broken, and yet I would always feel inadequate. I'd always feel like I wasn't actually doing enough because here I am just angry at the world, but the world's still not changing. It's not bending. It's not breaking, even though I'm doing everything I can to do that. And so um, I think that, once I had actually done what I'd set out to achieve, it's sort of, it brought an immense amount of peace back into my life. Um, and it's sort of, like I said, it felt like it answered all the things that were questions in my life and just gave me it's really hard to express because it's sort of like unless you have an experience of trauma, it's hard to express how much trauma sort of embeds in you and gnaws at you and
Mm,
how much ongoing harm it does. And when you actually get to bury it and heal from it,
mm,
how much that profoundly changes your life.
mm, mm.
Hmm. We
Wow.
kind of hit this one really deep right at the start. Hey?
Yeah, we're just going straight into it.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to talk a little bit about the legislation itself? Because I'm sure some people who are listening to this and one are not Australian, two might
Mm.
not even know what we're talking about and what exactly are the impacts and why this is such a monumental thing that happened for the ACT and Australia.
Yeah. So it's worth talking about the fact that so we had what would you call him? A sexologist, a doctor in the 1950s, Dr. John Money, who basically said that gender is all in your head. It's all about how you're raised. It's purely sort of like based on your environment. And therefore, the best and most compassionate thing you can do for an intersex child is to change their body and raise them in a way where you only give them the opportunity to believe that they're male or female. Um, and that's sort of been taken as gospel for decades, even though um, sort of like to have your body sort of changed and violated in such a fundamental way, to have those such important choices taken away from you, is a fundamentally damaging thing. And even though I don't think you'd have any doctor in the world today who would say, we still model intersex healthcare after the work of Dr. John Money. His work has largely been discredited over time. There's still this idea that intersex is something that can be fixed. But the process of trying to fix intersex variations and fix intersex bodies is one that causes intersex people harm.
Mm-hmm.
And so the push for legislation across the world is essentially recognizing that this is a system that doesn't work. This is a system that isn't changing. And so we need external forces to come in and change the circumstances of intersex people so they can be in control of their destinies.
Mm.
So there's sort of different layers of as to how you can understand intersex legislation. And so at the top level, it's sort of that angry activists, don't cut up babies kind of thing. But actually, when you start to interrogate that as a concept, it gets more and more complex. Because if you just ban surgery on intersex children, what happens if they need to get their appendix out?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't just have like a blanket ban. So then you can make it a blanket ban on surgical intervention on sex characteristics.
Mm.
But then you have circumstances where that blanket ban will cause genuine harm to intersex people.
Yeah.
Because we all have different bodies, we all have different variations, and there are circumstances where people can be harmed by their intersex variation. It's not true of every intersex variation, but it's true of some of them.
Yeah.
And so I think in the ACT, one of the things that we do really well is that we've really captured a nuance where basically there's sort of tiers to it. So emergency, any sort of life-preserving or emergency procedure that has to happen will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then things that are important to quality of life are interrogated through a process where basically you create treatment plans that go up before a panel of experts,
Mm-hmm.
which is medical experts, but also includes human rights advocates.
Okay. That's good.
And like intersex experts. So there are
Okay.
parents on the panel, there are intersex activists on the panel.
Oh, good. Because I was going to ask who's on
Yeah.
that panel.
So the panel takes from like a much broader range of expertise and experiences than just the medical perspective.
Sure.
And then from that, this panel is essentially empowered to create general treatment plans, which says, if doing this is always good for this intersex variation, then you don't need to go before a panel to get the treatment cleared. A doctor can just can consent to that, or the parent can consent to that treatment on behalf of their child, and the doctor is allowed to do that treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's individual care plans, which takes into account the circumstances where someone might experience an intersex variation more severely,
Mm-hmm.
or have a particular set of health circumstances where like a treatment plan needs to be considered. And so people can apply for an individual treatment plan. And then essentially this creates a huge amount of transparency. This creates a huge amount of accountability.
Mm.
And then where the surgical ban comes into it is basically any procedure that doesn't have a treatment plan that affects the sex characteristics can't be done on a child until they're able to participate in that decision making. And the other important aspect to the bill is that they can't be removed from the ACT to have that treatment done.
Right.
So those particular things are actually criminalized in the bill. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, that's big and complicated, I know, but essentially what we've created is a bill that caters to all needs. And it also provides funding for a psychosocial unit that's attached to the hospitals. So now there's actually going to be support for families who get bombarded with a lot of like panic and like limited information, and usually like it's sort of like a bit of a crisis moment. So there's now actually people who are there to help people through that sort of crisis point.
Mm-hmm.
But also, more importantly, it should be connecting intersex people to community. It should be creating a pathway that connects intersex people to peer support, where we know from experience, like at the EFSA retreat,
Yeah.
the best thing you can do for an intersex person is introduce them to another intersex person.
Yeah.
We know we have a lot more compassion for ourselves. Um, we have so much more sort of expertise in navigating medical precipices. We
Mm,
have like a collective wisdom that we can use to protect ourselves and each other, and it's worth tapping into that. People who connect to community are more empowered and sort of like taking control of their healthcare decisions, in even just feeling good about themselves. It's one of the things I really appreciate about your content is sort of like this idea of embracing differences in your body and feeling empowered by them. And
mm,
that's not something that, if you're an intersex person who only has that medical environment, who only has that medical lens to understand yourself, you're never given the opportunity to show yourself that compassion.
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm. And with this bill, um, obviously it took a incredible team working really, really hard to make that happen in the ACT. Why do you think, or how do you think we can push that out into the rest of the states, and what would be the plan of action to make that happen? Or why do you think that the other states wouldn't just follow this?
I mean, the joke answer is I'm retired, I don't have to care anymore.
Oh yeah.
More seriously, I think it just comes back to that boots on the ground advocacy. It's people establishing relationships. It's making those connections with the health departments, making those connections with politicians,
Mm,
making the case for intersex rights as sort of this what should just be a no-brainer, straightforward win. Especially
mm,
now we have this model of legislation in Australia. There is no reason why that can't just be copied now, and it should just be like any politician out there who just wants to notch an unambiguous win on their belt should be like leaping at the opportunity. But honestly, it takes getting up in someone's face and staying in their face and making intersex rights relevant to them continuously for these changes to take hold. There
mm,
has to be, you have to sort of manufacture a hunger for the changes, otherwise they just don't happen.
mm, mm-hmm,
So certainly, if you're an intersex person, or even if you're an intersex ally somewhere in Australia right now, now's the time to be writing your MPs, to be contacting officers, to be waving an intersex flag
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
as loudly as possible.
Right. So it's about contacting local government and reaching out to them, and anyone listening to this that wants to participate can participate.
Yes, be loud, be obnoxious, be a fawn.
That's great advice. I also, we had kind of discussed that we might talk about a couple of things beforehand. Um, I yeah, I'm going through this phase in my life where um pronouns are becoming less important to me. I felt very liberated by identifying as they them when I felt like I could for the first time. But I found like a lot of people messing up a lot of the time, obviously, because I'm presenting extremely feminine, that like people and then people would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or "I'm so sorry," or and all this kind of stuff. And so I've gotten to this point where I'm like, "Oh, I feel like it's not even that important to me because I know who I am on the inside." And language is important, but it's becoming almost, the pronoun thing is like less important for me. And then when we were at the retreat, you were saying my pronouns are hell yeah, or something like this. But I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm so relating to that right now. You just
I
said I'm
don't.
Cody and my pronouns are hell yeah.
Oh, I used to do a bit. So there's a couple of aspects to this. I guess like the context is for me. Okay, let's take this a step back. So the reason why pronouns are important is that uh, if you present a particular way and you feel a particular way yourself, and people only address the way you present rather than the way you feel about yourself, even if they don't mean to do it, what happens is that they're undermining how you feel about yourself. So that's why it's hurtful, and that largely why it's hurtful towards the sort of like trans and gender diverse community. But cisgender people will feel hurt when you misgender them. I know a lot of cis women with a very sort of boyish appearance who will be offended if you address them as masculine.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, definitely.
and so it's sort of like it's this idea that it hurts when other people indicate to you that they don't see you the way that you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's what makes pronouns matter.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel really secure in yourself and you feel really comfortable in your own skin and you feel really comfortable with your identity and other people aren't a threat to that and don't challenge it, then I think pronouns matter less. And that's sort of where I'm at. Is like, I know who I am, I know what I've been through, and I don't have time to sit down and like talk people through like give people the 2 hour conversation about my entire life that leads them to the place where they would understand my pronouns the way that I do. So for me,
Yeah,
like I don't like feminine pronouns because to me that validates the violence that I went through as a child.
yeah.
Um, and so I think to me, like me in my non-binary identity, me refusing to use feminine pronouns, to me, that's about rejecting violence. And so that is important to me. But I don't feel like I can be misgendered. I don't feel threatened when people misgender me. And so I like to have fun with pronouns. So
Mm-hmm.
I got quite infamous at agenda by having like these little jokes where it's just like, "Hi, my name is Cody, and I lost my pronouns in a divorce." Because at AGA, because you're dealing with a trans and gender diverse population, pronoun rounds are a thing. You name
Yeah,
your pronouns, and then like we'd have a silly question like, "What's your favorite bug?" or "What does the color blue taste like?"
yeah.
And so yeah, it was just my way of sort of like lightening the atmosphere. It was just a bit of fun. People really liked the ongoing gag. So like hi, my name is Cody, and I buried my pronouns in a shallow grave. The only time I ever got into trouble with that one was that we were delivering training to a group of like allies. So it was sort of cis endosex, kind of like well-intended, lovely people. And we go all the way around the room. Everyone's said their pronouns. We get to me last night. I say, without thinking, like it was just instinct by this point. Hi, my name is Cody, and I shot my pronouns just to watch them die. And there was just sort of like a stunned silence of the room before my co-presenter was just like, they're joking, just use they, them for them, that's fine. But like that's always been an ongoing joke for me. But yeah, so my pronouns were eaten by lions. My pronouns ran off to join the circus when I'm having fun with it. But when I'm being more serious about it, my name is Cody and I don't use feminine pronouns.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I think that's, yeah, really good that you've reached that point where you feel like so comfortable in who you are. That speaks a lot to your journey and your growth and everything that you've been through. So I'm very proud of you.
Gosh, thank you. I'm proud of me too at times.
And I relate to it because I think the more secure I am to, it's so funny because I went on this journey of I don't want anyone to know that I'm intersex to I want people to see me like for how I feel, which is non-binary, but like I also want people to like see me as intersex. And then I was like, actually, you know what? I know who I am, and now people can see me however the hell they want, and I know who I am. But I guess this will also nicely tie into what we were going to talk about, is identifying as intersex.
I think I jokingly said that we should talk about this to give Morgan a heart attack, and
Yeah, sorry,
I'm only,
Morgan, if you're
I'm only
listening.
slightly joking because it's sort of the big taboo, isn't it? Like
It is.
we have a way of talking about intersex, and it's about bodies, it's about traits, it's about characteristics, and we try to detach that from the idea of identity as much as possible. So it almost
Mm.
feels like forbidden to talk about intersex and gender identity as being sort of like in a way where it actually coexists and it actually impacts each other.
Mm.
So I
Hmm.
think like the first thing we do need to say up front is that for the vast majority of intersex people, it's not necessarily an identity.
Yeah.
It is something that they're born with. It's something that they live with. It's not necessarily something they identify with, and it's not necessarily consequential to how they understand themselves.
Mm.
So the vast majority of intersex people do identify as male or female in a way that's consistent with what they were assigned at birth. But I think there are conversations we can have that are more than that are interesting to have.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, definitely. Because I feel because I didn't even know that this was a taboo until really I got in touch with other intersex people. And because even looking at intersex activists online and everything like this, like I just didn't I was not aware
mm,
that was a taboo. And I even it wasn't until after I reached out to era really, and I spoke to everyone, and I was like, oh, okay, I really need to be careful with what I say, because like I don't want to speak on behalf of other intersex people. I don't want
mm,
to like hurt anybody in saying that I identify as being intersex. And then even saying like being born in between two genders, and I'm like, oops, I shouldn't say gender, like I should
mm.
be more specific about sex, and I need to be more specific with what I'm saying. um but it's been, yeah, it's been a lot, and great for me to learn about what I actually should be saying, and what I should be careful about saying and stuff like this. But for me, I know that I am non-binary and it is different, but I do feel however I'm made up, that's how I feel.
Yeah, I don't know if you have a experience similar to me in this case, where I did not have access to an intersex community before I had access to a queer community, a trans community. Like
Yeah.
the Canberra like LGBTQ community was the place where I was accepted first, where I found family. And so when I first came into sort of like the intersex political scene, I had a very queer rights oriented view of my intersex journey, and that was deeply problematic for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, and that led to a whole bunch of conflict at the start of things, which I'm glad got ironed out. But I think like some of the things are difficult to reconcile because, like I said, if my pronouns are a rejection of violence and my name is a rejection of violence, and my gender identity is a rejection of violence as well, I don't think I would identify as non-binary if I hadn't had this experience as an intersex person. And so
Mm-hmm.
in that sense, those two things are intrinsically linked. Um, and it sounds like yeah, you might relate to that as well in the sense that um, being non-binary empowers you to embrace sort of a sense of being different or being more than just male or female, and that's sort of an energizing, empowering thing,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
should be like it is awesome. It is it's a good headspace to be in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's sort of this is one of the things that I sort of started describing when I run training. I started describing this as consequential normativity. So it's the idea that you know, if you're born endosex, you're observed male or female at birth. You're assigned, or yeah, you're observed male or female at birth. I don't like to say assigned at birth because that has implications as to what the intersex experience of being assigned is.
Mhm.
Um, and then it's sort of you grow up identifying as a boy or a girl, then as a man or a woman, and then eventually you're attracted to someone of the opposite sex so that you have a relationship with them and have a family. And that's sort of if that's the common experience, all these things feel linked up together and sort of indistinguishable from each other. So I'm empathetic to people who, you know, I'm almost empathetic to people who say that gender is what is in your pants. There's this idea that gender is sex, is, you know, endosex, the correct set of sex characteristics,
Mm.
because they've never had to interrogate it. And if all these experiences are the same thing, like, and you don't have to interrogate it, how do you ever separate it in yourself? How do you ever get to the point where you go, okay, I can see how I feel about my body and how my body is are two different things.
Mm.
And I think that you can actually apply that in an intersex context as well. I think there are intersex people out there who go, well, my body is intersex and I don't identify as male or female. So obviously, how I feel about myself is that my body is intersex. And so that creates space for an intersex gender identity,
Mm.
which I've definitely spoken to intersex people who have this sort of feeling about themselves. I think at one point I was probably an intersex person who felt that way about myself.
Mm.
But then, like, as soon as you acknowledge that, uh, people feel threatened in their own sort of identities because it's almost like the existence of someone who is willing to accept that they're intersex at that level is either saying that they're not intersex, they're not intersex enough,
Yeah.
or that you know, uh, they're not male or female. Sort of ironically, they're sort of like there's a sense that they're not intersex enough to fully identify as intersex in the way that this person has. But there's
Yeah.
also a sense that this person who should be male or female, not identifying as male or female, is making me feel insecure in my male or femaleness.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Like there's just so many layers to it, and because there are so many intersex people, um another thing that I would like to touch on, I'm just saying that out loud before I forget it. But there are so many intersex people that um there's going to be so many people feeling completely different. And I know like most people, yes, they don't feel like it plays a role into their identity apart from, identifying with the experience of living this way and the experiences that you've been dealt as, everyone has that common shared experience. Um, but yeah, it's just that weird thing of feeling like sometimes I will just think about myself inside and I'm like, oh, I feel like I am a boy inside, a very flamboyant girly boy, femboy, and then I've just got this female outside, and then if I flick a switch, like I don't know, that's just how I feel. And for a long time I was rejecting even the notion of that because it's like that's not how I felt at the time. And you're exactly right about the um feeling a certain type of way because of this. Like I definitely think like if I didn't have my intersex variation, like I wouldn't be feeling like this because of the experiences that I had. Um, but I do, and that's the way I feel.
I when I found out at 17, I had largely gone through life as very tomboyish. Like my favorite thing to do after school was climbing trees to read comic books.
Mhm.
And um, I remember, like, I got into high school. I went to an all girls high school, and I just remember being shocked in year seven because no one wanted to play like soccer on the football field at lunchtime. They just wanted to sit around and talk about boys.
Mhm.
And I remember a lot of experiences of like seeing these girls grow up into women and like find ways to embrace femaleness that were meaningful to them, and never having that experience myself.
Mhm.
Um, and then also like another double whammy was then figuring out that I was attracted to women
Mhm. Mhm.
in high school. So then at 17, I I wasn't told this exactly, but the way I internalized what I was told was basically you could have been a boy or a girl, and what how we made the choice was no better than flipping a coin. So here I am feeling like I've had this very masculine experience that I'm attracted to women, and therefore this was somehow supposed to be the world telling me that I was supposed to have been born a boy.
Mm.
And that caused a huge amount of conflict, for me in my life at that point. And then it was just sort of and it was hard for me because not only did I feel like that the opportunity to be a boy had been taken away from me, I didn't feel like that there was room for me to transition. I'd never felt like I'd ever be accepted as a man. I never felt like I wanted to undergo like a medical process to become a man because medical processes are kind of what got me into this shitty situation to begin with. And so, without any sort of idea of what I should be or what I could be, or with no real sort of connection to community, I eventually found the genderqueer community, which sort of morphed into a broader non-binary community. I would describe myself as agendered. I describe myself as gender hostile, really, like gender abolitionist. But I sort of understand how it can be meaningful to other people and important to other people and at the core of other people's identities. But um, yeah, it's we don't talk enough about how being intersex can impact your identity, and especially if you're only given one mode of thinking, which is that even if it's just being a boy or a girl as an opt-in process, like that's not something that supports all intersex people. I think that that's why we're careful when we're talking about intersex and when we're talking about identity and when we're talking about bodies and stuff. That we're trying to talk about intersex in a way where we can protect the rights of everyone who is like us, even if they don't identify as intersex, even if they never find out they're intersex.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we come back to the sort of like working definition of sort of like physical bodies in terms of like we are born with innate variations of sex characteristics which expose us to unique experiences of violence and harassment. And I used to be able to rattle that off word for word straight off the era website, but it's been a few months.
Yeah.
But that is the definition that allows us to do the most kind of good, and that actually I'm yammering away here. Feel free
No,
to.
please, yammer on.
That sort of takes us into another aspect of intersex as an identity is that there is like an intersex political identity. There is like an intersex peer support community. There is an intersex culture you can opt into. And I think that is in itself an identity. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a gender identity, but you can't tell me that at the EPSA retreat in that room with everyone, all these people with these common experiences, that wasn't like a cultural identity. That wasn't a cultural experience.
Mm. Yeah, totally. It absolutely was. Yeah, something that I feel like I didn't really have until like I feel like my identity, the cultural
Mm,
identity, the relatability is something that has just gotten so much stronger since I've connected with everybody. And like it almost does feel like a different part of it, like a completely different part is that connecting and then identifying with whatever that is.
mm.
And I'm not too sure, like I'm not really involved in the political side of things at the moment. I mean, my way of activism is just talking. But like I haven't done any work legitimately politically, but I would like to one day. So I'm not sure about like the political identity. Like, do you know if they differentiate really like the social identity and the political identity?
I mean, there's a lot of overlap, and I think that there are times where, unfortunately, sort of like the intersex community in Australia is seen as being for activists or in the service of activists. I think there are people who are put off like not understanding that it's a lot bigger than that.
Mm.
And I think that that can be to our disservice at times, but um, again, like given a few months distance at this point, I do feel like I've done my time in the trenches with people who feel like genuine like comrades at like comrades in arms. It's sort of like yes, I do feel connected to a broader intersex peer support, but the people who went through hell with me to make this legislation happen, I feel like I have a very unique bond with that's going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I hope it all happens for the rest of Australia again. And is Australia one of the only countries that this has happened in?
There are other examples. I had something really good a little bit earlier. What was I going to say? Oh, I think like I we'll talk about sort of like the international community in a minute, but I think for me like one of the most important things about connecting to an intersex community is that before I talked to other intersex people, intersex was something I was, and
Yeah.
then afterwards, intersex became something I am.
Oh,
Yeah, told you it was good.
nice. That is good.
um, yeah, I think that to me, like that's become like an irretractable part of my identity as well. Not necessarily a gender identity, not necessarily a part of my internal self, but certainly it is part of the patchwork of Cody. I say with a patchwork quilt over my shoulder. This is great. My mum made it as a housewarming gift. It's got like embroidery patches of all my favorite things on it. So
Yeah, is that
you'll
an
notice there's a
intersex
little,
flag?
yeah, right in the corner on a little heart.
Oh,
There's
nice.
like corgis and goats and Batman and caffeine molecules and all kinds of stuff on.
Oh,
Anyway, so the international community. So, oh, geez. I should have the timeline of events much straighter in my mind than this. I think Malta was the first country in the world to pass legislation. We've seen legislation in Iceland and Germany. We've seen attempts at legislation in some parts of America. I think there were uh, New York issued basically an apology to the intersex community and a directive to doctors to do better. But it was sort of like a government supported statement rather than sort of like an actual piece of legislation. I think they're still sort of I, I think there's still a conversation happening about legislation. I know there's stuff happening in California and Texas as well. Um, Probably other parts I'm not completely across. I mean, American politics is in general a nightmare
mhm.
um, to even understand, let alone navigate. It's an incomprehensible system to me. Um, yeah, I honestly, without looking it up in Wikipedia, Greece was another one that passed
Nice.
legislation, but a lot of the problems is that they didn't pass nuanced legislation. So
Mm,
either they created restrictions that are potentially harmful, or they've created legislation that has loopholes or doesn't actually do enough to stop medical intervention. So we know that medical intervention still occurs in Malta regardless of legislation, and that's largely because of the way that law is structured and worded. Um,
my God.
So yeah, like I say, the ACT legislation is fairly unique in just how much detail it goes into, and also in the way that it resources peer support and support resources for intersex families.
Mm,
So it sort of has a more nuanced understanding in terms of like the whole system has to change at all levels, and you can't just blanket ban intersex surgery. Like
mm,
that's not enough.
yeah. Yeah. Ah, okay. That's interesting to know. And some of these countries are like, I mean, I wouldn't expect Malta. It's oh, such a tiny country.
I'm not entirely sure of the entire history there, but I know that Tony Briffa has a strong Maltese sort of heritage.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if that's like the driving force or if there are other activists involved or something like that. But
Yeah.
before we had the Darlington Statement, there was actually a Malta Declaration, which the Darlington Statement sort of iterated on. So there's actually a fairly strong history of intersex activism in Malta, though I'm not completely privy to it. It'd be interesting to go and deep dive into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And before we wrap things up and talk about the future for Cody, I just wanted to touch back on when I was saying there are a lot of intersex people. I have had so many people speak well, as people are talking in the comments all the time, but a lot of people talking about the statistic, the 1.7 statistic, and saying that it is, unfounded information that I misinformation that I'm spreading and all of this kind of stuff. Um and sometimes I reply to them, with a link
Mm,
from ERA, and I'm like, well, this is our definition of intersex and all of this kind of stuff. And there's so much speculation, I guess, for the statistics and like what is intersex and like how many intersex people there are and why some of these people feel that they're intersex and some not. Like,
mm.
for example, MRKH or Turner's. Is it Turner's
Yeah, Turner
syndrome? Yeah.
syndrome is the thing that's they dropped the second sex chromosome, so single X or
Yeah.
XO, X zero. Uh,
Something like this. There's
it's
a,
funny.
there's a lot.
It's funny how much of this stuff is just left my mind since I stopped having to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry
No,
for
no,
dragging
it's
you back
okay.
into it. It's one last time
No,
for the podcast.
I do thrive on this, and the opt in is fun, and look, the two intersex people having a conversation this deep and this joyful about intersex is a revolution. I couldn't imagine like doing something like this even 5 years ago.
Yeah,
So
me
this is
either.
yeah. So that 1.7% statistic is just like the cited academic resource. Like there are some people who just don't believe anything unless there's an academic who said it. And so that's just the study. There's not a lot of studies of the intersex population. That's just kind of the best thing we have. There are flaws with that study, but basically, when we look at the intersex population, the definition of intersex itself is fuzzy. We kind of have this medical construction that says that these, conditions, these diseases are intersex and these ones aren't. And but the problem is that we know that anyone who lives with a variation in sex characteristics has common experiences. Whether it's like a common grief over being sterile or a common like experiences of medical violence or common misunderstanding in relationships. We have these very universal experiences that surpass the sort of disease classification. So it's not useful to say that an intersex person is someone who is born with ambiguous genitalia. Like that's not a useful definition, and it's not useful to say that this, and this are intersex variations, but MRKH and Klinefelters and other things aren't intersex variations. And ultimately, when we look at sort of like the causative factors, when we break it down to this idea of innate variation of sex characteristics, we actually create a space for much larger populations of people. Um, so like one of the sort of most contentious sort of classifications in the space is that of PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which affects a huge amount of women. I think 5% of women. I can't remember if it's one in five or 5% of women, but like either way, it effectively doubles, triples the intersex population. if you classify it as an intersex variation. And how is it classed as an intersex variation? Well, it's hereditary, so it suggests there's a genetic cause. It affects hormone levels in the body and can produce secondary sex characteristics that are atypical. So just at a very, very face value thing. But then you have like PCOS, people with PCOS do experience medical gaslighting. They do experience discrimination when they're not feminine enough or when they put on weight. They do experience issues with fertility. So there are experiences that are common with the intersex variation. There are ways that they should benefit from intersex activism. But obviously, a definition that includes them creates a much bigger population than a definition that doesn't include them.
Mm.
So I don't think we really should sweat like how big the intersex population is. I think that we have a population that faces a unique set of challenges, and we're trying to address those challenges to the benefit of everyone. And at the end of the day, solutions that help intersex people should help everyone else. Whether it's how we improve access to fertility services, whether or not like a ban on medical intervention of sex characteristics can help facilitate a ban on cosmetic circumcision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's ultimately the size of the intersex population doesn't really matter. It's that we have these common experiences that we're trying to address. And when we address that injustice in the world, it should improve circumstances for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Great answer.
Hmm.
You really are good with words.
Sometimes. As I like to say, I speak two languages, English and bad English.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I speak mostly bad English.
Hmm.
So what's in the future for you, Cody?
Oh, I'm just reconnecting with joy at the moment. I think like the nice thing about having gotten to the end of this process is finding out that there's still a person left, like beyond the activist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just about this year. It's just about nurturing that. Like I want to do more creative things. I want to do another stand up set. I want to write
Yeah.
more poetry. I want to make games. I want to write a book.
Yeah.
Um, and when I feel like ready to come back to the intersex fight on my own terms, where it's no longer life and death, and I feel like I can opt in and opt out when I want to,
Yeah.
and that work starts bringing me joy and meaning again. I want to come back into it, but that's not going to be for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I hope you get a nice break from it. And I'm sure we're going to stay in contact anyway. But thank you very much for coming on. It's been a great episode. I'm sure a lot of intersex people are going to love this one. And endosex people as well.
My
Thank you,
absolute pleasure.
endosex people.
Let's do this again sometime.
Yes,
We'll find another taboo topic and tackle it.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay.